You are listening to the Midweek Redemption Podcast, a resource from Redemption City Church in Grand Rapids, Michigan. For more information about our church, please visit our website at redemptiongr.org.
Hello, Redemption City. Welcome to the Midweek Redemption. Today we have an interview with our very own Mike Bartlett. Mike, thanks for joining us.
Hey, happy to be here.
We realized that as we're making the rounds doing this 3-2-1 interview that we got Mike on here early to do, a content kind of driven interview, but we need to hear the story behind the man, the myth, the legend.
Oh man, I'm just kind of hiding out here behind the mic. Let's see.
So, we're just going to do 3-2-1 with Mike. We just got back from the church building, doing a little midday prayer.
Nice.
And we're going to try to get this interview in before the fasting afternoon drop-off or whatever.
That's right. We've got enough energy to make it through this interview, and then it's just that sugar is going to be crashing fast here.
But, 3-2-1, 3 people, 2 places, and 1 experience that have most shaped you or made you the man that you are today. You can start in any order. Yeah,
I'm going to start with the 3-2-1. It works here because I have the most clarity on the 3, and I have the least experience on the 1. So I might change my mind on the experience by the end. Who knows? But 3 people were probably the first 2. I think it's interesting. A lot of people were saying this, and so not particularly surprising, but parents being the first set of most influential people in my life. And I was actually struck by how many people on the podcast mentioned their parents.
Yes.
It's like you think in a culture with so many broken stories, so many people with father wounds, and to have so many people with great family stories, just giving shout outs to their parents is kind of special. And I'm in that same boat as well too. So. Yeah, my parents were hugely formative in my life. I grew up, and this gets a little bit to place here. They're all going to be all over the place, but growing up in a summer camp, experiencing.
Flesh that way. No, I don't want to interrupt, but that is a big part of your story. That I think is unique. We'll get to that later.
It gets to the place.
Okay,
it gets to places, and all. So that's where I'm these are all come together. Yes. But growing up on a camp, I was just hanging out with my dad all the time. Yeah. So a lot of people, their dads go off to work, and they don't really see them as much throughout, and it's like they're raised at home with their mom, or if their mom works, they aren't not parents at all.
Yes.
I was in a very different kind of situation where, I was home all the time. I'd be working with my dad all the time, and so got to see just what it looks like to be a godly Christian man, doing everything, the full range of work around the camp, whether it's speaking or teaching, running events, or doing all the behind-the-scenes stuff, maintenance, whatever. As a little kid, I'm just growing up, just being able to watch, him do his thing. And my dad's just one of the most faithful, kind of godly guys I've ever known. To the point that it was kind of frustrating me as a kid. I'm just he's just kind of boring here, just this very stable, very consistent. I'd always wake up in the morning, and there he'd be reading his Bible at the kitchen table, kind of the cliche kind of story there. And I'm and that was him, clockwork every morning. He'd be in the Word. And so, just a really amazing kind of witness. And getting to see him, all those years growing up, 14 years in kind of summer camp work, had a huge impact on my life. And of course, my mom was right there too. She was the camp nurse. And so she was in and out doing stuff too. But both of them were just super involved in my life, and even to the extent which they homeschooled us for a couple of years.
Wow. So
for me, it was during my middle school years, just a couple of years there of being at home, and so getting the full, absolute, complete, this is my world, this little circle, growing up in this little camp out in the middle of the wilds of northeastern Pennsylvania, outside the little town of Scranton. And so, that was my world growing up, the kids for the first 14 years. And so, just amazing, formation, just spiritually, but even just work life, work ethic. I feel I'm a work ethic from my dad. Just that kind of spiritual consistency. My mom was big teacher, reader, big in education, so learned kind of love of learning from that. And so many different cool things now, and I think I'm feeling it more with my dad. Has been the last couple of years been battling pancreatic cancer, and so just looking back has really caused me to reflect on, like, gosh, man, like how consistent, how faithful my dad was. And as a parent now, I'm like, I am way more impatient with my kids. Like, I am way more volatile. I am just like way more tightly strung, and my dad was just such an even-keeled, like, kind of guy. And like, I can remember getting mad at us, like losing his temper like once growing up, and I'm just like, how is that even possible?
Yeah.
You know, I can't hardly make it through a week without losing it on several occasions and all, you know, with my kids. And so,
what did you do on that one occasion?
On that one occasion, you know, I honestly, you know, it honestly was just a blip on the radar. It was just kind of like, I was like, oh, it was almost like funny. We're like, well, I guess we really pushed Dad's buttons this time. And so I think as a group of kids, we were just kind of like, oh, that was a curiosity. Like, probably shouldn't push him that far here. We've pushed to the edge of, like, you know, what kids can get away with without, you know, Dad losing it and all. And so I think as kids, we were like, well, we must have done something really crazy. Do it. My mom was a little bit more on the ups and down road, the roller coaster ride, more of emotions and all. And so I think I got more of my a little bit more temperamental disposition from her. But yeah, both of them just incredibly godly people, and very much love the Lord. And so
work ethic, love of
work
learning,
ethic,
those are pretty
love
big,
of learning. Those were all the key things.
components.
Love of food. I mean, my dad was a cook actually before he was a camp director, and so our family was always, you know, all the holidays were just surrounded by
Applebee's.
Incredible amounts of food. No Applebee's. To this day, I'm just like, anything that is not like homemade, I'm just like totally very snobbish about. And so that's why I roll my eyebrows sometimes when people bring anything that is not homemade and all. And so my wife was always just like, Michael, you're so rude. And so, but yeah, growing up in that kind of environment, you know, those were all big things. And then just being out in the outside, we were living in a camp, so I mean, just out hiking, outdoors, camping, backpacking, like that whole world, you know, was just, that was my backyard. I mean, horseback riding, shooting archery, and tubing, canoeing, all of it, swimming. We had our own private lake, gym, and all that stuff, so I'm going to get into some of that stuff later. But yeah, it's kind of made for a very unique upbringing, a very little world, but yeah, my parents had a huge influence, I think, because they were kind of very much at kind of the center of so much of that. Growing up in very rural Pennsylvania on this small little camp, and you know, they just had a massive influence, and really were walked with me right on through college and seminary, and have just been huge trusted counselors right up until now. And so now I'm in the position now where I'm like, man, I got to get back and be walking with them through this pretty hard season of cancer and kind of the challenges that they're going through. And so, it's I think privileged to do that, but hard to be 13 hours away by car. And so, jump on a plane whenever I can. But it's definitely, so much of what I've learned: work ethic, love of learning, love of good food, love of the great outdoors. So much of that trajectory, and then ministry. And I talk about call to ministry. I mean, growing up in that environment, my dad driving me into New York City, into Harlem, and I could still remember being in church at some gospel church in Harlem, and we're the two white people in the entire church swaying the wrong direction, singing off tune, and but as a young person, just thinking like, whoa, the gospel is way bigger than my little rural country view here, being in the big city, and growing up with people from all kinds of different backgrounds and races and ethnicities, and just seeing the gospel work in really brilliant, beautiful, diverse ways, both with kids coming from New York or Brooklyn, the Bronx, whatever, to Pennsylvania to camp, or me going there and seeing how my dad was building partnerships with like gospel churches in Brooklyn or whatever, was just it was super cool. And I didn't really appreciate that really until I got to like seminary, like just how unique and how crazy of or college, where I was like, oh, not everybody's had this experience in life.
Yeah.
So
That's cool.
So definitely.
Are you counting them as two or one?
They're one.
Okay.
So because they were just they were very
one flesh. You know?
They were one flesh union. They just both brought such different things to it, but I couldn't split them apart. So they'd be one. Second, not surprisingly, would be my wife, who burst upon the scenes in my seminary years and totally rocked my world in all kinds of seismic ways that have been pretty amazing at this point. I mean, we're almost going to be almost 16 years now.
Wow.
And so I was looking at that. I spent maybe 18 years at home with parents, but I've now spent almost the same amount of time with my wife, and I would say she's had the same, if not even greater, impact on my life. Getting to kind of walk alongside her. So that's been pretty.
What impact has she had?
Pretty fun. I mean, part of our seminary experience and meeting, we met at seminary and all, which was really interesting. And so coming from very different backgrounds, I was kind of growing up the good kid, the church kid, growing up in a camp and gotten saved when I was like 6 and was in seminary now, was going to be a pastor, to the surprise of I don't think anyone. And so, and then this girl who's this, blonde bombshell comes on the scene who's like, been through all kinds of crazy stuff, and she shared on her podcast episode her whole background of abuse and brokenness and drinking too much and drugs and all kinds of craziness. And so when we met, I was just like, whoa, this is like this person is like the polar opposite of like my experience. My quiet, reserved, thoughtful kind of family. Jamie is this very non-reserved, wholehearted, just deeply emotional feeler and all. And so there was just an incredible amount of curiosity, I think, meeting her and just getting to talk with her, hearing her story. I mean, I can just remember just being totally just floored. Like, God has done an absolute incredible work of like redemption in this person's life, and I get to remember just being like, I'm on holy ground here. Like, God has clearly been at work here, and I'm just kind of here along for the ride. And so just seeing her heart for ministry and her passion was so like, I mean, it's what I grew up around, but like to meet somebody who at that point, I'd been a Christian for, almost, 15 years or something, to meet somebody who's, new Christian with this incredible fresh passion for Jesus and love for him, and it's incredibly emotional, like, I'm such a thinker, I'm so get lost in my own head and all, so to meet somebody with just this passionate, emotional, just response to Jesus, somebody who's done it in their life, I mean, it was just so impactful to me, and always, I think, has been. I think because I don't have that huge emotional, we don't have a lot of strong emotions in the Bartlett family there. So I think people that have them are just like, wow, that is like a gift, like that is so unique and so because it's just not something I identify with. So, but I resonate with, but I don't identify, if that makes any sense. So it was definitely a case of opposites attracting, and so she brought this very, I'm this like all this intellectual world of the theologian. I was the classic seminary guy, like the know-it-all seminary student, theology nerd, teaching assistant to the professor of systematic theology, like knew all the right answers. And then she was the classic kind of like, kind of emotional, like feeler, social worker, just wanted to work with broken people. And I was just had my head in the clouds somewhere. And so, it was just a meeting of opposites. But she started to very gently rub away those rough edges here from my very awkward, antisocial kind of world, and begin to really give me a little heart, I think. There's starting to work in my life. So there were a lot of interesting moments there where I grew a ton. I'm first year or two of marriage of just kind of self-awareness and getting out of my books and like, oh, there's a big world out there and people. And, my wife was very, I think she's just so well attuned to people, so, emotionally intuitive. And I was just like, oh my gosh, we're like amazing, like in like the way you just relate, and she's a good listener, and I'm of course a terribly prolific talker, and so just learning so many key like lessons from her about people. And just her love for Jesus, her love for people has just continued to really challenge me, convict me, encourage me. And so I think I leaned on her skills and all a lot in terms of just, if you've been around her, she's an incredibly warm person, and so she's just this it's like people just kind of swarm to her like moths to a flame, to her kind of relational warmth.
Only they don't get zapped and die.
They don't get zapped and die. It's just like, wow, just brought into this warm, soothing light and all. Whereas me, I was just like, the opposite of just very like, I will give you a very strong.
Yeah, that's kind of cool that you noticed the opposite and were like drawn to it. Instead of like theologizing your way out of it or whatever. Yeah, well, I tried. I mean, that was the funny thing about our relationship and all, is that like I actually was like, I'm going to get rid of this girl. Like, she's really sweet and incredible, but she clearly knows nothing. Like, she is just this very naive, person. She knows nothing of good theology. I mean, she can't quite Calvin. The building blocks of a good marriage.
Clearly of Western civilization and, the world and theology. And so I was like, I can adopt this, this initiate into my school of learning, into my little seminary and teach her all the great things. And little did I know that, I was going to be the one that was into learning a little bit to the great school of emotional intelligence and relational learning and all of those really beautiful things. And so I think she picked up a few things along the way, but certainly not quite the aggressive curriculum that I had designed for her at the beginning of that relationship there. So people always say, you married up in the world, or that's kind of the classic, line there. But in my case, anybody who's known my wife knows that it's absolutely 100% true. I went through the Acts 29 assessment process, and all the guys were like, "Yeah, you're fine, but your wife we love." Like, I mean, like, she just has a huge heart for the gospel and for people and for mission, and like you know your theology, you know your stuff and all, but your wife, she's a force to be reckoned with there. So, and so that has proved to be true, and made for a very dynamic ministry partnership throughout the years here as we started our work. Ironically, this is totally crazy. We were doing like I think it was called Be the One or something, like abstinence education was like our first tag team ministry event. How crazy is that?
After you were married?
A bunch of newlyweds.
Oh,
No, actually, I think we started before we were even married, maybe. But like literally, and while we were newlyweds, we were doing like, and she would give this amazing talk and share testimony, and then I would get up and give somewhat slightly drier biblical talk give kind of the seminary version of it and all. But it was fascinating as we started to grow in that dynamic, and then we'd have break-offs with the guys and girls, and like actually digging into like real life, like what's on every teenager's mind,
Yes.
Every man's battle, so to speak. It was really just talk about eye-opening for a seminary student used to debating, the finer points of theology. We were talking with a bunch of hormonal high school students, and so it's been fun. We did youth ministry after that for a couple of years, and that was incredibly cool to see just hospitality coming together and just welcoming people in our homes, and it's really beautiful experience. And all the way through to church planning. She's been cheerleader, she's been the woman of faith, she's been the go-getter and all, and I always hear pastors talking about how their wife is super nervous or anxious or concerned and worried, and she's like, nope, that's never been me, that's always been Mike. And so I've always been the more anxious, worried about finances, and to the extent that she's like, people always talk about the nagging wife, but what about the nagging husband? I mean, come on. I mean, what is the deal with that anyways? So there have been a lot of really humorous situations where, I've just been able to do so much as a pastor because I have a wife who's just all in and ready for anything, and rolls with the punches and loves to take big risks and has a big heart, and all those things have been really off the top of my head. Some of the ways that she's pretty well shaped and formed my life. And I feel like a I'll probably write a book at some point on the pastor's wife or something, but maybe by one contribution at some point, or maybe she'll write the book.
Yeah,
that'll be a little better there.
Yeah, you can write the foreword.
I'll write the foreword. That's this thing. But yeah. What did Jonathan Edwards write the book Marriage to a Difficult Man? Or not Jonathan Edwards' wife, but someone wrote a book on being married to Jonathan Edwards. That might be what the book shall write.
That'll be part 2.
Marriage to a Difficult Man here. I don't know. But oh my gosh, yeah. So yes, I mean, and the saga continues. I feel like to this day she's still like pedal to the metal, like, such
trying
a huge
maybe
asset.
move houses.
We're talking about, right now, and it's crazy. I mean, I convinced her to just, parachute drop here into Grand Rapids and like try to plant a church, and without knowing anybody and without having any space, or just with a few connections and relationships. And she's like, sure, let's do it. Just signed right up for that. And now we're talking about buying a building, and she's like, of course, why would we not do that? Like, this is amazing. Like, think of the opportunities, think of the ministry potential we would have to work together. And so, yeah, with kids in school now, we're in a very unique season where we're like, our capacity for ministry partnership has just like, well, we can hang out during the week, we can collaborate together, can run stuff by her, and, chatting up sermons with her, vision plans, just seeing so much more at this point in my life, how much more, enriched my perspective and vision is. I remember reading in Tim Keller's book, A Meaning of Marriage, like, you've really been like married to somebody for a while, like when you start to like see life through their eyes, like them so well, like when you're in a situation, even if they're not there, you immediately think, what would Jamie think? What would Jamie be feeling? What would she be saying? And that's one of those things that now I'm just like, my life has been so impacted by her. Like, she's been such a, reality in my life that even if she's not there, I'm just thinking, now what would she be kicking me right now? If I were saying this or telling me to stop talking, or it's that thought is always there in my mind. And so it's beautiful to like, somebody so well that like, you can almost start to see life through their perspective and through their vantage point, which has made me a much more humane person.
Hashtag relationship goals.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Nice.
So, beautiful stuff. So
third person.
So the third person would be not a person here. This time I keep combining groups of people because I'm cheating, but I can do that because I'm the interviewee here, so
That's
I can kind of make stuff up.
We've been pretty fast and loose with the 3.
People have been pretty fast and loose. I would say this one, the elders of Redemption City Church, past and present, have been the most influential. I was trying to think about this, like which one person, but then I was like, it really doesn't feel, in one sense, it doesn't feel like it's been one person anyways, but everybody on the team that I got to work with for the last almost 10 years has just been unbelievably impactful in my life. And also, I was like youth pastor, I was in ministry at various other capacities, but not at like a high leadership level. And so I was pretty much kind of running fast and loose, kind of doing my own thing as a youth pastor, hanging out with other youth pastors. And so planning a church was like the shock of my life, going from like this, happy-go-lucky youth pastor guy who's just like doing big events and teaching kids and like, people, like, you're the youth pastor, go have fun with the kids and like, you're fine. Starting to make those adult decisions and like thinking about budgets and finances and really difficult, weighty pastoral care issues and marriages that are imploding, or people that are losing their job or getting diagnosed with terminal illnesses. Like all of a sudden, I'm dropped into that, as a kind of youth pastor with zero pastoral experience, and so to have a group of guys walk alongside of me, and we've had from anywhere from 5 to 7 men for the last most of the last 10 years kind of walking alongside of me, seeing me make all of my remarkable blunders like in judgment, and they've seen the highs and lows of my emotional and spiritual life, like have seen me thinking through philosophy of ministry and like what are we even doing here. And so I think to have a group of men that like, and this is very rare from what I've at least talking to other people, like having a group of lay elders that I've met with, most of them for every week, like weekly for the last, almost 10 years, like to be in each other's lives, week in, week out, walking through all the pastoral work, through the preaching, vision, fundraising, in each other's lives, marriages, parenting. That has just been by far the most deeply impactful, those relationships, the intensity of them, like this totally like everything's on the table, with our lives, with our ministry, and being in somewhat of a fishbowl, I think, too, being kind of a church planner and kind of like starting everything from scratch. That relationship has been incredible. I mean, I can vividly picture, seasons where I was so depressed that I was ready to essentially turning in my resignation, to one of the guys and hearing them kind of walk me off the ledge, and kind of vividly remember scenes in which we were, counseling a couple that was, wanting to get divorced, and like, just the pain and challenges that, I've seen people, walk away from the faith. I mean, just really, heavy, weighty stuff. And to have a bunch of guys step into that, I'm like, I'm getting paid to go through all this pain. And people always joke, that pastors, lives, they work one day a week. They just have that 1 hour a week where you got to kind of show up and hit it out of the park on Sunday morning, and maybe make a few prayers at formal events, or that's the pastoral work. But but gosh, no one talks about like the being up late at night, or those trips to the hospital, or just being invited into the points where they're most weak, most vulnerable, most hurt. Sin has just wrecked their lives in various capacities, and you show up there. You're a first responder. You're a spiritual first responder, and you get hit with all the shrapnel and the trauma and all of that. And to me, the fact that a bunch of like lay people, and I say that, I don't say that at all disrespectfully. I'm like, the people, like, they showed up, like they have full-time jobs, but like they're gluttons for punishment, like they want to get in on that kind of a ministry. And for me, I was like, you guys are pastors, like I'm a solo pastor, I can't do this on my own, and so you guys are gonna have to pastor these different communities that we're starting here, and to watch these guys wade into really weighty issues, like it's been the coolest thing to be a part of.
Just thinking all the like relational like layers of like doing something meaningful together, like that's a huge connection. But then when it's like there's also all this personal stuff where you like lean on each other for like personal support and stuff. So it's a pretty intimate kind of connection point being on the elder board.
It's and ours has been some elder boards are very like business oriented, and ours has always been probably 50-50, like pastoral care for our own souls and for the church, and then the other half maybe being the business and vision stuff of it. And we've maybe even leaned even almost more to the pastoral care side of it. Like so much of it, it's just been our personal growth because we're all growing. I think that's been the biggest gift to me, is like being a youth pastor for 5 or 6 years, like, and then stepping into pastoral ministry. Like, I'm like, guys, I don't know anything. And so, being able to have that level of like, I need help, and then a bunch of elders who've never done it before going, we need help. Like, just to have that shared amount of like, hey, we're all just learning this together, and like there are going to be we're going to make some big mistakes, we're going to fail in some big ways. Yet we got each other's backs, and there's grace. One of our previous elders used to always just say, there's grace for you, my friend. Like, there's grace for you. And it sounds so like, I don't know, maybe cliche or cheesy to hear on a podcast, but just to have someone look you in the face when you're just totally blew it in some massive way, and just to have somebody to be able to extend God's grace to you in that was just like, very a lot of pastors feel like they're just giving, and pouring out, and just kind of running on a dry. But there's been a lot of mutual ministry and a lot of care for my soul through all this. I've felt really blessed and cared for and encouraged, and in a lot of different seasons. But I think the last couple of years, when I was coming up on 7 years of ministry, which has been a lot of pastors tend to kind of burn out, that was very much like to watch those guys kind of come alongside and rally around me at my lowest. It was really, really cool. Really cool to see. So I'm just really a tribute to me to like the value of having a team of guys that you're accountable to, that you do life and ministry with, that you're, just the beauty of a plurality of elders, not being on some kind of a platform or elevated position above them, but working alongside of them. It's huge value, and really hard to do as a young church planter, to find the right people and discern, who you can trust, and who's going to be a faithful follower of Jesus. And so lots of learnings for me as a pastor in that, and lots of love for those guys. Who you are. What a gift. Yeah, who you are. We're sitting on the other side of this microphone listening to this, and thank you for all of your investment in my life. So
awesome. Yeah, that's beautiful. Well, on to two places.
Yeah, you have to keep us on track here. I'm running out of time. I'm just talking here, so I'm a prolific talker. So
it's all good.
I have no idea how long I've been talking for, but two places. Places are really hard for me because I've been to a lot of places. I grew up on this really cool summer camp in northeastern Pennsylvania. Lived in New Jersey. Went to college in Virginia. Went to seminary in Pennsylvania.
4 places.
I went to Florida. I've lived in Minneapolis. Lived here in Grand Rapids. So I was just like, gosh, how do I choose? And so I kind of narrowed it down to the 2 places I've lived the longest, because I think they've had probably the most impact. But probably growing up on a camp in Pennsylvania, which probably would be the formative place. Kind of like my parents, just like the formative place in my story. Grew up on this little camp outside of Scranton, Pennsylvania, out in the mountains. It was about an hour and a half from New York City, and so a lot of the work that they did was bringing kids in from New York City, from North Jersey, and just being able to do ministry in the summers. And so that was just my life growing up. Summer camp was just tons of kids from New York City. We'd be driving in to pick them up and then driving back out, and then be able to hear, gospel preachers from New York City would come in and preach, and gospel music, and just amazing experiences of God working and moving in my life. That's where I got saved, actually sitting in on the back of one of the sermons, and one of these black preachers from Harlem was preaching his heart out and all, and I was just like, oh my gosh, like the weight of my sin and hell. And here's like the camp director's kid sitting in the back here. I don't know, it was 6 or 7 or something, and tears streaming down my face, like going and talking to one of my counselors, like, oh my gosh, I got to get saved. And so that's what I grew up in, like just in this incredible environment of God doing work in people's lives from all over the, black and white, whatever. And so summer camp was just like a revival every week, and I probably got saved numerous times after that too. But that was really powerful. And then over the winter, it would just be church groups would come in, and each weekend, and so that would be really cool too. We'd be a part of that as well. And so that place I think has shaped me. Both love for the country, the great outdoors, love to take these kids from New York City who had never seen like a wild animal before in their life. It's like, yes, that's a deer. And, like take them out hiking or canoeing and just, show them the ropes. But then also to be in that urban environment and be experiencing New York City as a little kid and be like, wow, the greatest city in the world. So, that I think has shaped me a ton in terms of just seeing the gospel at work powerfully in life, seeing myself, kind of get saved at a young age, and like, just having like every kid's dream kind of upbringing there, essentially living there. And so I would say that's probably, formative place. Lots of cool stuff happened there. I started, teaching the Bible for myself there. Taught my first Bible study on Ecclesiastes as a young camp staffer there in 9th grade, I think. And so, very precocious.
A deep reflection of a freshman on Ecclesiastes.
But that was, I wish I could have, I wish
funny.
I had the tapes to listen to What on Earth. I could just remember the youth or the director of that summer being like, that was a little long there. It was typical, like...
it started back then.
It started all the way back then, long-winded messages. And so it's where the gospel really took root, where I got saved, where it took root when I was working on staff there. Like once, first time I left home, and so I'm living with kids, staff from all over New York, New Jersey, like Newark, like, we had we had the run of the place, and we're learning what it looked like to kind of live our lives, for Jesus in that environment. And so huge impact on my life, and kind of towards call to ministry. I think the other area, and this is probably second location, would probably be Grand Rapids. And I feel like I just kind of elaborated on that a little bit in terms of the elder story and all. But
Sure.
I think being here has been, so I was in Pennsylvania area for the first, roughly 18 years of my life. And all 14 years we lived there, and then I came back and did summer staff for the next 4 years. So pretty long stint there. Then I was in 4 years in high school in New Jersey, 4 years in college, 4 or 5 years in youth ministry, a year of a residency, and then I landed here in Grand Rapids, and I've been here for coming up on 10 years. And so this has been the area where, I feel like I actually got my feet wet in ministry.
Sure.
This has been the first location where, it's starting to feel like home, after growing up in Pennsylvania, to be like actually have a passion for a place and like the history. I love the city of Grand Rapids. It's been so fun learning about the history, both the pros of Grand Rapids and the negatives. Reading books about like the race history of Grand Rapids, and starting to get the story of the people here and the sense of place, and has been really, really valuable. It's kind of my coming of age here. Being in Grand Rapids, moved here around 30, and I just turned 40. So just like, my coming of age in ministry, coming of age in marriage, coming of age, in so many different ways in this really vibrant, growing city. So it's been...
Which, what would you say are some of the values, like cultural values of Grand Rapids that you feel like have shaped you or you most resonate with?
That's a great question. Grand Rapids, I think, hard to put like a really fine point on it, but I think just the, I would say first coming from the East Coast and from an area that's not particularly known for its hospitality, I would say something about the Midwest that's been really beautiful to me is just how welcoming it is and how connected it is. Like, I think for me, growing up at a camp, I felt like I was from like another country or another world. And then dropping into like Grand Rapids, it's like you're in this, there's generations and generations of Dutch people that have lived here and like, done life here in this community. And, it's just a very warmly relational thing. Everybody's connected to everybody. Everyone knows everybody. There's family connections they call it Dutch bingo around here. Like, it's like, who are you married to? What's your last name? And, people will kind of throw that out. And so, that was actually really endearing to me, like growing up in like, around, not at the camp, but in New Jersey, Philadelphia, other places I've lived, people were just not connected like that. And so this is the first place I lived where people like loved the city. Like, there were like, artists doing like Grand Rapids, like promotional videos, like Rob Bliss is like, his love for the city and like, people love the place and love the people and, the connections here. Like if you grew up in Grand Rapids, like you're always a Grand Rapidian and, people always will connect with you. And so I thought as a pastor, I'm like, it's beautiful that these people have this sense of family. Like everyone loves it. We're looking out for each other. We care for each other. And so, I think that idea of family was something that was very like refreshing as we'd like show up, like do a block party or something in our neighborhood and everyone would come out and be like, wow, this is so cool. I'm like, this would not happen in Philadelphia or something. People are like, what the heck are you doing? Why are you trying to like, start something here?
Yes. And
like people just, their willingness to just kind of be friendly, get to know people. I don't know if it's a Midwestern thing. You could probably speak to that more than I could, but just this gregariousness and like friendliness and like, hey, we just want to like hang out together. I'm like, is this like a big like youth group here? Or like what's, as a city, it's just like, people are all very, it's a lot of youthful exuberance and fun. And like, I think Grand Rapids has like record in the Guinness Book of World Records for the longest water slide. Like, just like goofy, fun stuff that people have done, and the love for the city and the art prize, some of the different things that are happening around here.
Art prize is awesome.
The creativity. I love the creativity, love the energy, love the entrepreneurial spirit, love the coffee shops, the breweries, all that whole creativity side, energy. But the relational piece probably would still be the most kind of endearing to me. I think it can get weird too, as in terms of people are like, oh gosh, family is, this burden or this obligation, and people want to break free from that. But I think
cool.
I think that side of it all,
Yeah.
it's all pretty interesting. But it's cool to be in a growing city. I mean, I grew up like outside of Scranton, Pennsylvania, which was like this depressed coal city that was just slowly dying.
Right.
And was only revived by The Office to be forever immortalized as a sitcom or whatever. But to be in Grand Rapids is like the exact opposite spectrum. Like to be in this young, growing, vital city, pulsating with energy, and there's always cranes around because new buildings are coming up. There's just a lot of youth and vitality here in this city, which is really exciting to be a part of. And of course, I couldn't neglect the love of learning here in this city. Here we've got lots of colleges, seminaries, book publishers, and so I could go on for probably hours talking about Baker's used book section, or Puritan Reform's really cool Puritan library, or the fourth floor over at Calvin College. Now Calvin University doesn't have quite the same ring to it, but I love the kind of the academic atmosphere. I love the fact that there's colleges and seminaries and college students who are excited about the latest ideas and trends, and as an intellectual person there's something very stimulating about being around where all the book publishers are, and be able to sit in on lectures and hear world-renowned speakers come and talk. We're in the middle of the January series right now at Calvin, and so we just get a real wealth of incredible speakers here to this city, and it's got kind of a disproportional influence to its size. It's a very small to mid-sized city, but a lot of people have heard of it because of all the publishing companies or the universities, and so
that's cool.
That's another part of it that's really for the book lover in me. It's
absolutely
speaking my love
good
language.
Well, that brings us to the final countdown here. The one experience. I honestly could not narrow it down to one experience. I'm like, there is not really like one experience. My life has been shaped by, I think, so many little experiences. So I really struggled on this one. I literally was like, I've been changing my mind, I think, every day as I was thinking for the last couple of days. I was like, one experience, like what on earth do I talk about? And so, so I guess, I'm on here as a pastor, and so maybe I'll go back to my call to ministry, which I've talked about a lot, but I think it's still probably true that it's still one of the big shaping events in my life and all. And I think that came in a lot of different phases, but I think in college was when it really came home to me personally. Like I'd gotten saved early on, and this is what I'm always trying to reconcile in my mind, because I got saved at an early age, and I didn't grow up in a dead kind of religious environment. It was like a very lively, awesome, lively faith, and so, but somewhere along the way I kind of lost that in high school, and I think just kind of struggled with the realities of life in the world. And high school was rough. We moved off the camp to this backwater town in New Jersey, and it wasn't the best. It wasn't my finest moment. Nothing against Vineland, New Jersey, but it wasn't one of my finest moments or finest years. And so so I think going to college and all, and heading in this direction of going into law school, and I'm not going to be one of those ministry people that's having to raise support from everybody. Mooches.
I'm not going to be a mooch. I'm going to make a real difference in the world. And I don't know where, somewhere along the line, I was like, well, I'm not good at math or science, so I probably can't be a doctor, or be I can't be a stockbroker, so I can't be a finance guy. I don't have the numbers head. So I'm like, what can I do that would be that doesn't require any math or something? I could be a lawyer. That would be a career that would be successful, and I could, good with words, good with reading, and all that kind of stuff. So I think being in that world, I spent 3 years kind of joined the debate team, was like, all right, I'm going to do all in on this, law practice, whatever I can do to succeed. And, was heading in that direction. I managed to graduate from college in 3 years. I tested out of a year of college.
Nice.
Was on the fast track to heading off to law school, until I took my LSATs, which is law school admission test, my senior year. And, that was a real, just rocked my world. I had, to that point, cruised through college. I hadn't started in honors, but I just jumped. I had such good grades that I jumped into honors along the way. I was doing all this stuff. I'm scoring, A's on all my tests and courses and high GPA, and then took the LSATs, and it's like I just kind of ran into a brick wall. I scored like dead average, like, 50th percentile on the exam, and it just literally like wrecked me. Like I was like, I could still remember vividly being like on the phone with my mom just crying and just like, Mom, I just got like, I don't even like 50th, like I was going to go to Georgetown, or, I was going to be in DC studying law with the best and brightest minds and constitutional law, and here I am, like I just totally bombed out on this test. I'm like, I'll be lucky if I can get into like Rutgers back in New Jersey or something. And so it just really crushed me, and I dealt with a lot of anger with God and a lot of frustration, because I'm like, God, like, I've been a good kid, I've done all the right things, I didn't drink or smoke or chew or.
Do you think about taking it again?
Yeah, I did, actually. That's the funny part. I don't know if I told you this story, but yeah, I took it again. And, the first time I didn't put the study time I needed into. I was like, I got this. The second time I studied, I took the pretest. I was like, everything I could do, and I actually scored worse.
Whoa, really?
The second time.
You're just like psyched out, or what do you think it was?
Yeah, I literally, to this point, am not entirely sure. I think part of it was just the lack of I mean, the LSAT is very different than like a normal test. Like it's much more logic. It's much more math than it is than it is.
Regurgitation.
From the what's the word I'm trying to say? The English side of things, like the lit, reading comp, like that part of it I aced. But then the more like math part of it, that component just kind of crushed me. And part of it, I think realizing through that was just the way God wired me. Like I'm more of a literary person. I'm not as much of like an analytic, like a really logical, rational, like mathematician person. And so, as a lawyer, you need that very objective, cool, clear, rational brain. And there's some romantic part of me that was not jiving with that. And so it was a huge learning experience, I think, for me, that experience of just failing epically at that. And at that point in my life, I never really failed at anything. I just succeeded at everything I did. And always got good grades, always just, and this just like crushed me, because I was like, I had built my whole kind of image around that for years. And so, that experience just was a major like blow to my pride and to like my ego, my whole sense of identity. And I mean, it sounds silly now, but like, I just built this image of myself. And so during that time, I was still doing ministry stuff and but it just felt to me like, that's what I'll do pro bono on the side. I'll do the Lord's work, like a dutiful, good Christian person will. But during that time, that's when actually the gospel was starting to get more sweet, and that's when like my real brokenness and neediness and weakness was like, oh, okay, maybe I really need this more. And it was also a time where I started reading John Piper, in his book Desiring God, and just having this encounter with like, I'm really not happy like trying to do this law thing and trying to like succeed in this field, which maybe I'm not really that wired for. Like I have this image of myself, but like the joy is really to be found in Jesus. And like I'm like, what am I even doing here? And so so I ended up kind of deferring my law school admission and heading off to seminary for a year just to kind of do a gap year, just to kind of test the waters, and the rest was really history from there. I ended up just absolutely like loving the experience of like, oh, seminary, this is where I belong. Like this is the world in which I've been running from for probably a lot of years. My high school years, away from that world of ministry and mission and all that.
I can relate a lot to that. I feel like people who were driven and kind of had like a nerfy version of like the church or ministry or whatever. It's like, you do that like on the side or whatever. John Piper comes with like the glory of God and the kavod, you're like, weight, and you're like,
so weighty, man.
There's some substance here.
This is like people's lives are getting changed, and like the world is different because these guys and hearing Piper speak at like Passion 01 or whatever, like boasting only in the cross, and I'm like, tens of thousands of college students are like giving their life to the Lord in ministry and missions, and I'm like, maybe there's more to this whole Christianity thing than I thought. And I think somewhere in my high school mind I got this kind of naive idea that like ministry is a great little thing we Christians do, but like to really change things, I don't know if it was my Christian school upbringing or what, but like we got to go change the world, and to do that we need to take over politics and law. And somewhere along the way I got this strange idea that like where the real action was happening was at Capitol Hill.
Oh, God help us!
And I
can't believe you just said that
today. in this climate, I'm like, clearly Capitol Hill is
there
not.
There is action happening there,
but it's not the right kind here,
no.
And so I grasp intuitively at that point, like, okay, maybe the real action is happening somewhere way upstream. Like politics, where we're at politically right now is a result of, a lot of cultural currents that are way upstream that have created this really toxic culture we're living in. Government can't change all that. Government is just mirroring the brokenness of culture, and whereas, the church's work is way upstream with personal transformation, with cultural transformation, trying to work at a higher level. And I wouldn't be able to articulate that for years, but I think intuitively as a college student, I'm like, maybe the action is here. Like maybe people's lives are being changed. Maybe this is where it's actually at. Maybe this is where God wants to spark a renewal or a revival, or do the work. And hearing guys, some of these guys like John Piper, Tim Keller later on, I'm like, whoa, like these guys are like making a real impact in the world and our culture for Jesus. And like, man, I'd love to be a part of that. Have some little role to play in the gospel work of our times. And and
here we are,
and got that vision in college, and got a big view of God, and all of a sudden headed off into ministry, and now looking back 10 years in, and still very convinced, even more so today in our own cultural climate, how much the church is God's plan A, and there's no plan B, like for bringing people together. And so I love the work and love the calling, and it's really been cool to journey along through it, and it's really exciting times right now. Bringing on associate pastor, and then talking about purchasing a building, and so it just seems like it's kind of hard for me to believe looking back, surveying the story here, like, wow, God's doing some. Aslan is on the move here, as one of my favorite authors, C.S. Lewis, would say.
Nice. Well, that's a good word to end on. Well, thanks for sharing all that with us, and thanks for serving as our pastor, and all that. We love you, and glad that you're our pastor.
Yeah, it's been a joy, and good to sit down and talk.
All right. Well, thanks for listening, everybody out there. We'll see you next time on the Midweek Redemption.